Okay, so then you go to Rutgers.
Yeah.
And what are you reading then?
I started reading Ezra Pound and E. Cummings, these white writers that I had never heard of before.
Yes, and they had to be, when I remember when I first read them, they said, wow, I've never seen anybody do this before,
Right,
write
exactly.
in this way before.
Well, that's what, I mean, Cummings first, I never seen that. Pound, all other allusions to, you know, the odes and, you know, the use of the whole, you know, the influence of the Confucian, you know, epoch. I was influenced by that. You know, I began then to read T.S. Eliot, you know, and that was a little boy. I mean, I was then a freshman in college.
Yeah.
But then I couldn't stand Rutgers. You know, when I was in high school, I went to a high school that was predominantly Italian. I had to come all the way across town to go to high school. I started taking writing classes. I took 2 writing classes in high school. I became the sports editor of, you know, the high school newspaper for the last week of school. I mean, why they did that, it became obvious to me, because we were going through these transitions on the racial scene. So even though I hadn't done that for all those years, then my last year, for 1 week, I became the sports editor. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
That they would actually do that to a kid? Because I didn't know what was going on, you know. Then, and I read science fiction. That's what I read. My reading at home was much deeper than it was in high school, really. I mean, the books that they gave me in high school I didn't really like. The Yearling, The Scarlet Letter.
Yeah.
I thought they were corny books.
Yeah.
You know, but the books I used to read at home, you know, H. Rider Haggard, you know, those adventure tales, and Kipling, you know what I mean, and Yerby. I thought that was some exciting stuff. But this stuff in high school was corny. But I started to write. I kept writing in high school, or at least in these writing classes. As a matter of fact, they just published the first story I ever had published. And they even have an actor reading it on, you know, on
a CD?
Yeah, on a CD. It's called First Something, First Voice or something like that. All these writers, they first published stories. This was published in a high school magazine. And so when I got into college, I then, you know, what that did is open me up. For the first time I read, for instance, James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which I loved that book. You know, that was, I don't know what that was. It gave me a sense of another life. And a lot of the things that I learned in that, I didn't even understand until later. I didn't understand that Joyce was a nationalist, you know. I didn't understand certain things in the book.
Now, when you say another life, what do you mean another life? Because surely even Haggard is giving you a look at another life. Yerby is giving you a look.
That was
at
in
other
my
lives.
house. See.
Okay.
You see, that was in my house, and it was a little boy. I could sit up in my house and read. You know, I could go in my room and stretch out in the bed and read stuff. So even though that was about weird stuff, which I liked, because then in high school I would read science. I loved science fiction. You know, but the Pound Eliot stuff in college was context by being among mostly white students, but I had been in that before. Why? I don't know. Now I was in college now in Newark, Rutgers, and the things that Pound and Eliot and E. Cummings talked about were different, seemed different somehow. They seemed,
and then Joyce?
And Joyce, it seemed like was different, because those were a little more complicated, remember. It was not just the easy, well, you know, not easy ever, but the easier reading, I would say a Charles Dickens, you know, or Yerby, you know. The Pound and Cummings, Eliot stuff had a complexity to it, some of it useful, some of it not useful, that, because certainly later on, I mean, I liked Ulysses of James Joyce, but when it came to Finnegan's Wake, I thought that was like nuts. I thought it was just garbage.
Now, are you consciously, or can you recall consciously saying, gee, I see what he's doing here, I like that, and I can use that, take it to another dimension or twist it in a certain... Are you consciously absorbing these things, or you think unconsciously absorbing these things?
Both.
Not that they're influences in this way, but are they shaping you?
Well, sure. Absolutely. I mean, those people I just named, Cummings and Elliot and James Joyce, they were definitely, I mean, as to whatever extent you can say is influence.
Yeah.
But they had it's like you suddenly see that people are doing something quite different. That there is an element of experimentation that you hadn't understood before. I mean, certainly the Cummings thing with the letters all over the page and all
Yes.
that was peculiar. And for me, it was very interesting. It was,
Did it give you permission to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That you hadn't thought you could do it before.
I didn't know that people did that.
Okay, and then from Rutgers to Howard, and
But,
how's that?
there's one other book. There was a
Yeah.
book called 100 Modern Poems by Selden Rodman. If I ever meet, did Rodman die? I don't know. But anyway, as that transition in Rutgers, I read this book, 100 Modern Poems, and then I got the whole story. I mean, or the beginning of the whole story. I read people like Apollinaire and Baudelaire and, Rilke and people who were like, really out there. You know what I mean? And they couldn't be no further out than the others. But then I could read in this anthology, 100 Modern Poems. They were, Bertolt Brecht. I began to see, man, there's a wild world out here. People are doing all kinds of wild stuff, saying all kinds of wild stuff, and thinking all kind of wild stuff. And then I always loved the idea of these people who were experimenting, but saying something that I could agree with. You know what I mean? That always, I loved that when they were saying, when they were really doing something weird, but I was like, geez, I could agree with that.